Lovely. Okay, so I just want to welcome the people from YouTube. It's lovely that you could join us. We're holding you with us right now. We've got a nice group here today, and I would love to introduce you, if you've not already met her, to our lovely Jean Francis, who was ordained in 2012 on her 72nd birthday. And over to you.
Thank you. Now I've got a box here to get rid of. It says this meeting is being recorded. Sorry, and I don't know how to get rid of it.
There should be an OK button on there.
I don't know. There's one that says got it. There it is. Sorry.
There, yeah. No worries.
Start recording again because I couldn't see everybody. It was just covering the screen. Oh, well, thank you, Sas, for your introduction, and welcome everybody. It's lovely to see so many faces, new and familiar ones. So family-led funerals. If I just start by telling you how this all happened for me. My background is wedding and party planning and catering. And I've done that for 36 years. And out of the blue, I was invited to go to 2 funerals. They were both of elderly gentlemen. And this is the important bit. They had both pre-planned their own funerals. They were both very different. One of them was very, very simple. It was a gentleman that used to go to the spiritualist church that I went to for a while. And while we were waiting to go into the service, he always handed round a bag of sweeties. It was routine, barley sugars or fruit drops. And when I heard he died and the group of us were going to his funeral, I suggested to the minister, shall I get the sweeties? And she said, oh, yes. And so while we were waiting to go in, I passed the sweeties round, as he always had, and try singing All Things Bright and Beautiful with a mouthful of fruit drops. It does bring smiles to people's faces. And it was a very lovely service, just, very simple. And at the end, when the curtain went round the catafalque, it was Vera Lynn saying, we'll meet again, which of course is a spiritualist way of being. So that was the first one. And I just felt elated. We all did. We just wanted to sing and dance. It was just so, we just felt like the feathers. Whereas often when you come out of a funeral, there's a feeling of sort of, I don't know, depression, despair. Some of them are very, very black and quite depressing. Well, they were. I'm going back quite a long while now, probably to the early 90s. And then the other funeral was completely the opposite. The elderly gentleman, he'd lived a high life in London in his youth. And he planned his funeral with his granddaughter, who was nursing him as he reached his final years. And we all were invited to gather at the funeral director's garden, which was very beautiful in the middle of town. And there were little gold chairs set out in the garden. And Grandad's funeral was under the veranda. And the family took the whole service. So there was someone playing a violin when we all arrived. Various family members did readings. And then there was a rather strange song, Molly Malone's, you know it, underneath the lamppost, da 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 da. And then finally, his granddaughter suggested that we all, it was grandfather's wish that the funeral directors take his old coat away and dispose of it, and his spirit would be with us. And we were all invited to the Royal Hotel for a champagne lunch, check our parking tickets, and taxis would be arriving to pick us up. absolutely amazing. And it was just such a lovely, amazing occasion. It was just like he was there. Champagne flowed, and we had just a wonderful time. Didn't have to worry about we just had taxis to and fro, and it was all on Grandad. So they were the first two funerals, and I realised that they were just so delightful. They were real celebrations of life, and I thought this is how a funeral was supposed to be. And it was a light bulb moment when I realised that my party and wedding planning experiences, I'd catered for lots of funerals, but then I suddenly realised the planning part, the celebration part. So that's what I now like to do, plan life celebrations, and pre-plan them is the answer if ever you get the opportunity to do that with people. So that's how I got into it originally. Then I worked just very briefly. I retired from the catering business, and I worked as a funeral arranger at lovely Arca Funerals in Brighton. And I think they were probably the first company that were very eco-friendly and really caring about the environment when it came to body disposal. It was just a wonderful, wonderful 10 years I was there. And then I decided to leave and try and set up on my own an online funeral planning business, which I'll sort of come back to later, but I'd like to now show you my PowerPoint presentation. I might need Saz's help to actually, wait a minute, I might manage it. Let's see if we can.
You good? We're all there.
Yeah.
From beginning.
From beginning.
Yeah. Do you want to try clicking that one again?
Yeah. There we go. Thank
Fabulous.
you. So there are certain things that people are not generally aware of, and I think it's important to point this out to start with. There are only two rules when planning a funeral. A body must be disposed of in a legally acceptable manner, and lots of paperwork completed, but you can do virtually anything else, which surprises people, but that is a fact. Funerals generally cost a fortune, and people can hardly afford to die very often, but it doesn't have to be. When you know what to say yes to and when to say no, you can really have a very reasonable send-off. But you have to really pre-plan again for that to happen, because unless it's all pre-planned and written down, when someone dies, the family are in grief. There's so much to do, all the options. You're not worried about all the options. It's just sort of like, let's get through this. But to pre-plan it, think about it beforehand, it's got to be the way. So you do not have to use a funeral director. A service or ceremony does not have to take place in a crematorium or place of worship. You can have a service in the garden, in the woods, on a hilltop, virtually anywhere. If it's a public place, you have to get permission from the local council and possibly inform the police, so there isn't any sort of question about a body. And also you can be buried on private land or in your garden. There are all sorts of options. So I thought I'd just point some of those out to start with. Now, Mary and John Bingham, lovely, lovely couple. They were very, very dear friends. John died a year before Mary. But when it was Mary's turn, her family were very open. They knew I do this sort of thing. And they were very open to her funeral being videoed and photographs taken. A lot of people think that doesn't sit very comfortably, but in actual fact, nowadays, a lot of people do this. And it was just such a wonderful occasion, and they were delighted because they can look at the photographs again. They've got videos, and to them it was a huge success, and for me a massive gift. So I can really share with you the love that went into the arrangements as this family rallied to create this amazing occasion to celebrate Mary's life. So Mary was known as Moomin to her grandchildren. She had 12, and they gathered around the cardboard coffin with their acrylic paints, and they laughed and they cried together as they painted the images of the family house, the animals, the woodland, the vegetable garden, the lot. The dogs even were painted on there, as you can see, I think just in a little window at the end. And it was just wonderful to see them all working together and chatting and sharing memories. A very, very bonding occasion. And in the meanwhile, I'm going to call her Moomin from now on. Moomin's 6 great-grandchildren gathered in one of the houses, and they made the most beautiful decorations for the funeral car. They sort of scrunched up brightly coloured tissue paper and tied it at intervals on string, and that was eventually wound round the car, which looked absolutely delightful. And they just loved it. It involved everybody, this funeral, which I think is a really important part. And her great-grandchildren drew pictures and wrote messages, and they had these cloud-shaped stickers that they stuck on top of the coffin. The coffin was sort of sky blue, the lid, and it was, by the time the children had finished, it was covered in clouds, which was a lot. And some of the little ones drew pictures of Moomin too, which were absolutely delightful, but I couldn't find one of those to share with you. But they were all so busy and so involved. So there's the coffin completed, and the face on the end is Sai Baba. That was our connection. They ran a Sai Baba group, which I was a member, and he was included on there as well, which was really important. And here we are on the right with so many people you could hardly move, wanting to take part in winding the garland around the car. It was just an estate. They used, the funeral director just used an ordinary estate, no hearse, nothing, big and flashy. And again, you can use your own car, providing you don't have to use a hearse. There's all sorts of forms of transport. That's another whole session. Now, this has to be my favourite photograph of all. This little boy, he was in charge of the 2 dogs. These were Moomin's dogs, her beloved dogs. And that little dog, he tried so many times to get it to move. It absolutely refused until it was ready, until it had said its own goodbyes. And it really wrenches my heart just seeing the picture every time. And you can see he's sort of like, oh, how much longer have we got to wait? Just such a beautiful, beautiful picture that says it all to me. And then this is the procession. Mary's son and her 2 daughters led the procession down the village street, right through the village, and villagers just joined in. Family, friends, neighbours. There were wheelchairs, there were babies in prams, pushchairs, dogs on leads. It was a real carnival feel, really. I'm surprised they didn't have some music to go with it, because it was a very, very, and everyone came in sort of bright coloured clothes, no black. She didn't want black. And here we are, we've arrived at the church, and the 12 grandchildren, they are, teenagers here, they're getting the coffin out of the car, and they carry Moomin into the church up quite a long stretch, and it was quite difficult getting 12 of them all round, but they managed perfectly. And here we are in church. There's the coffin sitting on the catafalque. There's the family house you can see on this side this time, a little work of art. And the service, well, that was something else. It was extremely, however can I put it? It was extremely lively, as you can imagine. It was a fairly traditional service, and in between hymns and people reading poetry and what have you, family members played the guitars. They're a musical family, but the whole thing was played with babies screaming, children shouting and playing and running up and down the aisles, dogs barking. It was, I'm sure she absolutely loved every minute, but it was quite difficult to follow the service because there was so much activity. Oh, goodness me. So, and then it was Mary's wish. And again, this is something, if you pre-plan, you can say, what I would like is, I don't want everybody to come to the crematorium. And it was just her wish that her 3 adult children accompany her to the crematorium. And sometimes the funeral director will just, everybody can wave goodbye there, and the funeral director would take the deceased to the crematorium or to burial. But it sort of has to be the person's wish, I think, because otherwise it could look rather uncaring. Possibly, I don't know. Anyway, the garlands apparently stayed on the car all the way down the motorway and back again. So meanwhile, we all gathered in to celebrate in one of the houses, and there was so much. Everybody had brought signature dishes along. There was music, people sang and danced. It was just a wonderful, wonderful occasion. And then a whole year later, the family asked if I would do a little memorial service for them. It was such a huge privilege. So back in the village where they had both lived as a couple, people gathered in the village hall, and they processed quite a distance along a country lane to a little woodland glade. And it's a woodland glade that Mary and John had planted many, many years before. And I'd put a table in the middle, a trestle with a pretty cloth over the top. I had a great big, beautiful old-fashioned china bowl on the table, some scallop shells, other bits and bobs. And when the Mary's and John's son and the daughters arrived, they'd carried their parents' ashes. Dad's was in his favourite biscuit tin, and Mary's was in a beautiful box that had contained chocolate with a big bow on top. So you don't have to buy an urn, a special urn. And they mingled the ashes into this big bowl, and they went into the woods. They found sticks. They came back, and all 3 of them mingled the ashes, Mum and Dad together again, and then invited people to take a handful, a shellful, and go into the woodland and scatter the remains and just say their own personal farewells. And the other thing I forgot, so I've written it here, but I forgot to say, the procession as it came along the country lane, it was following the sound of drumming. Again, very musical household, all of them. And they were drumming in the woodland as people arrived. And there was drumming again afterwards, which was very, very lovely. So there they were back in the woodland they'd planted all those years before. And then we went back to the village hall, where there was a delicious afternoon tea, lots more music. There was some of Mary's artwork there. These are goose eggs she'd painted beautifully, and there were all sorts of other pieces of her work there on display. And the family gave out copies of her coveted dog biscuit recipe to all her dog walking friends, which I thought was a very lovely gesture. So that is really that part of the presentation. But I have gone on just to show you a few more ideas and just talk through some other possibilities that might interest you. Obviously, I and many of us are very aware of the ecological necessity of having green, ideally burial. If it's cremation, there are ways you can make it greener, but woodland burial is the greenest we can get at the moment until there are other options. So to be buried in a beautiful wood, bluebell wood, how lovely is that? Or a lovely wildflower meadow. And they're popping up all over the place now. So there are lots available. Some of them are kept, some of them not. Now, this is a funeral I did for a friend, a very dear friend, who just loved the great outdoors, particularly water. She loved to swim. And I decorated this coffin for her. It was a labour of love. I just loved every minute. Acrylics are used for the sea, and the little boats. I sat in the evenings cutting these tiny little boats out of teeny weeny sort of coloured envelopes and tiny bits of corrugated cardboard, and just stuck them all together and then stuck them onto the coffin. And there was a little bit of glitter where the waves were swishing around. And we laid this beautiful lady, very, very dear friend, into the coffin we had sourced, her daughter and I sourced sheep's wool from a mutual friend's flock of Jacob sheep, which I'd washed, and we lined the coffin with that. And then she was put in amongst this beautiful, beautiful sheep's wool. We sprinkled her with rose petals and lavender. And the other thing, I got a bottle of rose spray, perfume spray, and we sprayed her with that. She loved roses. And then her daughter had the rest of it. So if ever they wanted a connection to be near one another, the rose spray is their connection. And Sue had been to one of my workshops before, quite a while before she died. And one of the questions is, what form of transport would you like? And she said, oh, my push bike. Well, when the time came, look what her family actually managed to do. They actually managed to take her to the church, this to the church first, pulled by her cycle. She cycled everywhere. So, and I think that kept the family busy working that one out for quite some time, but I think they made a brilliant job of it. So she went from there to a woodland burial. This is going into the church, woodland burial in a beautiful bluebell wood, like I like the image I showed you previously, and I was lucky enough to do the service in the bluebell wood. And it's the family, it was fairly traditional, because I didn't feel terribly comfortable reading out these very, very, very religious, because she suffered a lot towards the end. She really went very in a different direction to the direction I'd known her to follow. It was quite morbid, the things she chose, but I actually didn't feel comfortable reading them, so other people were very happy to read those. But her family at the end had tins of gin and tonic, and they gave those out, and we gave her one too. That was her favourite tipple, so that was a treat at the end. And then of course there was lots of nice lovely gathering afterwards. This is you know, I say you don't have to do the service ceremony in a church or place of worship or crematorium. This actually is my ex-husband's funeral. It took place in the Quaker Meeting House locally, and he had an yellow coffin because he'd always wanted a yellow car, and it was autumn, and the family just picked up leaves and bundled them, just sort of like a lovely natural effect. And because there weren't very many people there, because most of them had gone on beforehand, we invited everyone for coffee and donuts before the service. So it meant we'd entertained people, and then the funeral director took the coffin away. We waved goodbye and went out and had a lovely lunch. And then this is a Viking boat, which is a lovely way of creating a mock Viking funeral. You put the ashes in and you set fire to it, and it's the nearest you can get to a Viking funeral. And this is an acorn urn, which was one of Arca's special offerings. It's biodegradable. And my final journey is on this 1974 electric milk float, simply because I go out with my daughter. She runs a charity and to save the planet. And so that's what I've requested to go. So I'm wondering how you will choose to travel. So I realise I'm sort of been speaking for quite a long while, haven't I? So last wishes, live your legacy. I'll just briefly explain this. It's a bit complicated. During COVID, or going back, when I left ARCA, I started doing online day workshops, and I did them face to face. Then COVID came, and so a small group of us got together and we got the whole course, a much more intense course, all online. Level 1 is plan your own funeral. Level 2, it's become a teacher in your own community. So this now is currently being streamlined by an amazing lady, in particular, a minister, Jude Mills, and hopefully soon the rest of us can gather and actually get this out into the world. It's just being tidied up at the moment. So watch this space. So I think that's my last slide. Stop sharing. So I have rambled on rather. So has anybody got any questions? Would anybody like to share their experiences, or where would you like to go from here?
Feel free just to unmute yourself and just jump straight in. Sharon?
I just wanted to share with everybody, thank you so much, Jean, I really enjoyed that. While you were talking, I'm sitting in like a conservatory at the back of my house, and 2 feet away on the edge of the door, a little robin came and knocked on the window. and just sat there for a while and listened. So I just wanted to share that with you because it was such a beautiful thing to happen.
That's very sweet. Very, very often there are things that happen. When my ex-husband, going back to the yellow coffin, it was, I think, an October day, and when there was a peacock butterfly flying around, which was really quite unusual because it was, quite chilly. And so now every time the family see a peacock butterfly, it's like, oh, it's Granddad. Yeah. Lovely, that's really nice. Thank you.
Jean, it's lovely to see you and to listen to you talking about your work, and I'm excited about the future for the course that you put together, because it's so needed. And I'm really grateful to the conversation I've had with you that have allowed me to move more into funeral work. And recently it wasn't family, but it was a school mate from 40 years ago. And we had a gathering at school, and it's the first time that the school had ever had such a thing. But it was just lovely to kind of know, to have the confidence to go ahead with that, and to know that we were allowed to do it, because she had died in Ireland as a member of a Catholic family. So her funeral had been 48 hours after she died. So she had planned all of that in advance. So that had been very smooth for the family to deal with, but it had all been so sudden. And when I offered to do this for those of us who'd been at school with this lovely girl, they asked if they could come too. So they flew over to Teesside and spent the weekend. And it was just such a special occasion and such a privilege to do that. So I just wanted to kind of say that, thank you for all the work that you've been doing over these years. And for giving us the confidence and the enthusiasm to move into this important ministry.
Oh, that's lovely. And there's so many more places we can go, folks. My problem is I have so many ideas, and it's difficult. The difficulty is putting them all into action. But I'm trying to get ceremonies to people who have a diagnosis, who perhaps haven't got very long to live. Let's have a party. Let's do it now. While you can hear people saying the wonderful things about you, and it's an opportunity for you to say thank you to the people that have helped you. Give message, just to communicate with. I've been to so many funerals. I hear the eulogy. I'd known that about the person, and it's then too late. But to have a wake before the bake, it's not a very tasteful phrase, but makes such a lot of sense in many ways. So and I think there's a huge opening there for us all, but it's just getting it into getting it into context.
Jean, may I ask something? This was such an interesting presentation, and I have a very, very elderly father, and so I'm thinking ahead and thinking about the sort of things that I feel would honor his memory, but I'm very nervous of raising any of it with my siblings, because what you're saying is very different from what most people have ever experienced at a cremation or a funeral or a celebration of life. And I wonder if you have any advice about how to raise these things in a way that's not threatening or too scary for a family for whom it would be a completely new concept, especially this idea of doing the honoring in advance.
It can be a tricky thing, but I think over the years I've discovered or how I've done it with my family and other people too, is, do you know what? I heard a fabulous piece of music this morning. I would love to have that at my funeral. And have you know, I really like that. Have you thought about yours and just sort of leave it there? And then another day you could find perhaps a piece of poetry, or oh, I think I like this piece of music better, or just in little, just feed it in little amounts. I had my son and daughter here the other day, and my daughter's lived with what I do, but my son probably is a little bit backs off it. But I said, while you're together, I want to play a lovely CD I've got, and I'd like to play it at my funeral. And I played the CD while they were both there, and I thought, actually, this will help them too when the time comes. You know, it's sort of breaking the ice, isn't it, in just little ways, slowly. Or you know, with children, to sort of use the word, oh dear, the flowers have died, or dear, that cabbage looks like it's already dead. Just things like that. Bring the words in just casually in all sorts of different ways. I run a death cafe for many years, and I was intrigued by all the phrases and words that people used rather than say someone had died. And I've made a list, and it's way over 100, and I still add to it rather than use that phrase. Amazing, isn't it? So I think just little snippets now and again, and things like perhaps, well, I had a good idea the other day, you know, sort of this lady had well, I'll tell you what I plan. I've asked my daughter I've got lots of junk jewelry which I'm very fond of, and I've asked her to hand that round at my funeral so all my friends can take out a keepsake. You know, it's not of any value, but it's the things I've loved, and it just means I'm sharing. And people do that with scarves and books and all sorts of things. Whatever takes your fancy. But it's quite nice to be able to say, well, by the way, I heard a really good idea the other day, and I like that. I think I'd like that to happen. I'm going to write it down, you know, gradually feed it, gradually make notes and talk about it in little snippets. That's the way I would suggest.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful.
Or if you see a funny vehicle or something, oh, I think that would be quite nice. One of our lovely ministers, when her husband died, he was a musician, and I love the fact that he went to his grave in the old white van that they'd been out on all their trips with, and it was always dirty, so it was dirty on that day, and she put on it his name and last journey, which I think was so absolutely personal and perfect.
Just very quickly, there's just a message in the chat for the people on watching on YouTube from Caroline, just saying there's a lovely movie, Love at First Sight, that is a great example of a living memorial.
Yes, yeah. I was told about that, but I haven't got Netflix, and I don't know of anybody. It's on Netflix apparently, yes, but I haven't seen it yet. But I do understand it is a must watch.
I think what I'd like to add is actually while I was on the course, I was doing a little bit of research, and I found if anyone knows the artist Grayson Perry.
Oh,
yeah, he did a series of just talking about ceremony and ritual in everyday life, and there was one program specifically dedicated to funerals, and if you can find, I do believe it's on 4OD or the streaming service, Channel 4. and he actually goes through a living wake, and it is beautiful. If you ever get a chance to watch it, it's absolutely beautiful. But I did see, sorry, Trisha, do you have a question as well?
Well, I was sorry for being late because I really enjoyed the talk. I have to say I'm envious sometimes of the length of time that you have in England, because I love the painting of the coffin. You know, I've done a couple of celebrations of life, and I did talk to our funeral director, who's a very accommodating fellow, and I said, listen, if I wanted to paint a coffin, you know, for a funeral, but we do only have 48 hours. And he says, well, I really don't have that many plain coffins, you know, on hand. And I said, okay, well, so let's say I want to paint my own coffin for my own funeral. How do I do that? And he says, well, obviously you just order the coffin, take it away. And I said, when it's painted, what do I do with it then? And so obviously they'll store it at a price, or I can keep it in my garage. So I said to my husband, I think I'll keep my coffin in the garage. And he said, what? I really don't think so. So it's
Not unless you're going to be in it.
Yeah, not unless I'm going to be in it, he says. So I have to figure out a way around that. But I do think it's a wonderful way to express individuality, you know, because the two celebrations of life that we did was a very simple coffin, and really the only thing that we could do was drape it with things, you know, and it would have been just wonderful to be able to paint it. So I do in some ways envy the length of time you have in England, but on the other hand I also like the traditional Irish wake, so I can't have it both ways. That was a wonderful talk, thank you.
When I was working at Arca, when it wasn't very busy, I decorated coffins and they went in the window, and my eyesight was very bad at the time, and it was the most wonderful big canvas that I could actually see and work on. And I decorated one with denim, which is now still being used by Clara, who owns the company, as a coffee table. She's had some glass cut put on top, and it's a coffee table. And of course, it's a wonderful space to keep things in. You know, or the paperwork or the blankets or something, so it can be used. And you can also buy coffins, well, you could make them too, I suppose, like a broom cupboard. When the time comes, you take the shelves out of it, if there are shelves in it, and close the door, and then you've got your, you know, there's all sorts of shapes and sizes and things you can do. That's another
handy spare bed. Very handy spare bed.
Yes, yeah. That's plenty of cushions in. Yeah. And it's a lovely way of bringing a family together. I personally would love, I have tried it, but hospices are not open to the idea. I have difficulty with you know, their very narrow vision. But I tried to get some families. I've tried to get permission for families to gather in a hospice when someone, you know, hasn't got very long on this planet. I think it would be lovely, rather than just lay and think of a big black hole or whatever people think about, to have the family come in with memories, with photographs, and decorate the coffin for that person, and laugh over the good times and share, and the children can, you know, write notes, and it involves everybody. And I would love to make that happen, but again, it's just a big possibility that it just needs loads of people to do.
Oh, Caroline, please just jump in. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you so much. Your presentation and your warmth in particular is so evident. I'm delighted I could make it today. But just something in relation to the Irish context that I wanted to share. I was of the opinion too that we were very restricted to that 48 hours or whatever until my mother died. And because I had spent kind of about over a week of just being with her. I was completely exhausted at the end. And I said to the funeral undertaker, I don't want to have this funeral within the next 48 hours. I want to push it out. And actually, we didn't have the funeral for it was near enough a week from the point in time that she died. And there was no problem with that. He said, like, it's very much an individual decision. So maybe that's something to bear in mind if somebody really did have a preference for having the coffin painted, that we can help to hold that line rather than it being kind of into the ground so quickly.
What happens in a situation like that if the coroner's involved?
It tends to be a bit longer, Jean, than just the it wouldn't be 48 hours if there's a coroner involved. But if in my mum's case there was no coroner, it was like it was old age and dementia that she had died from, and she'd been in a nursing home, so there was no reason for it not to take place kind of fairly rapidly. But I just felt I want to actually celebrate her life, and I knew I was not in a fit state. I was too exhausted. So I just said, no, I don't want to do that. And that's what I did. So, and he said, there's no problem in saying whenever you want it.
I guess it must depend probably on whether they've got enough refrigeration, because I mean, a lot of funeral directors still embalm bodies, but I could do another whole evening on that. Do investigate what embalming consists of. It poisons the embalmer, the earth, the air, and everything around us. So do look that up. I'm horrified.
And just to add to that, on that note, and I realised this at my sister's funeral, because that was a question I asked, there's no choice in it here. It happens automatically in Ireland. All bodies are embalmed.
Well, that is massively, massively un-eco. I mean, I'll send you the page out of my one of our manuals to Sash, and you can perhaps put it on a newsletter. I mean, it's horrific. It really is. And actually, there is no need to embalm a body nowadays because there is refrigeration. Embalming started in the war when soldiers had to come back, be transported. They died abroad, back to be buried with their families. But nowadays, with refrigeration, it really isn't necessary. Cara, who owns Arca, where I worked, she was an embalmer. That's how she started out. And she's never ever embalmed a body unless there are a few, or she has had a few embalmed. She won't do it herself now, but if under certain circumstances, if somebody dies abroad, they have to be embalmed to transport them. If it's an open coffin, and like the Queen would be, because people were filing past the coffin, or a certain. And if a body's kept for a long, long time, but generally there is no need. It's funeral directors do it, charge you for it. This is why I'm saying funeral does not have to cost a fortune when you know what to say yes to and when to say no.
I wonder how much difference there is in the cost of embalming and being pickled in a barrel of whiskey. Because that's what they used to do, wasn't it? They put the body in whiskey or rum to bring them back from
Yeah.
Can I jump in? First of all, thank you. It's a very, very beautiful presentation. It's so lovely to see the creativity and beauty that came into the funerals that you've been able to facilitate. My question is, I was ordained this year and I'm still finding my way where I'm going. I'm very interested in supporting people, particularly people who are nervous or afraid of the costs that go into funerals.
Yes.
For bringing awareness to people's options, I'm very open to, and I'm doing a course at the moment, so I'm there. But also, personally, this is an area I'd like to move into. And personally, I have Parkinson's, which means that I am at home and my capacity to get out and do funerals or support people in physically is difficult. So I'm wondering whether there is any need or wish for people to create their own funerals, who just want somebody like yourself or myself who could facilitate them in Zoom conversations to create the funeral they want. And how viable that is. Is that worth pursuing? Do you know much about it? Does anybody else?
That's what we're actually planning, Cheryl. Dear Roland did the course, which wasn't as up together as it should have, as I would have liked to have been previously, but it is being streamlined, and it is something, yes, that you'll be able to do online or in your own communities in soon, hopefully. It is all being worked on at the moment. Yes, so we'll keep in touch. But I think it's really important, you know, and a funeral doesn't have to cost a fortune. There are lots of ways that you can save money.
Jean,
which is another evening, really.
Jean, could I ask, would you be open to people contacting you over email should they have any questions about the Last Wishes project?
Yeah, absolutely, yes, by all means.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're happy for me to do so, I'm happy to share your email in the newsletter along with anything like supporting material you want to send over to me. I'm more than happy to share that with everybody, because I think we can all agree this has been absolutely fascinating. I've not personally had the opportunity to lead a funeral as such, but just looking at those photos and just the idea of the photos being taken actually got me here. You know, the funerals I've been to, if I'd felt comfortable enough and welcome enough just to take photos, I absolutely would have. So it's just something as simple as that to bring people together is just beautiful.
It was a gift to have permission to do that. Yeah,
absolutely. Do we have any more questions at all?
I'd just like to say, if you ever do feel like doing a workshop on creativity and how to make things more economical, I'd be there.
Yeah, I'm really happy to. Yeah. And we can either do it like this or individually or whatever. Yeah.
I'll be in touch, Jean. You know me.
Yeah.
Letty, please.
Thank you. Yeah, just to follow up on what you mentioned about living wakes, or whatever we'd like to call them, and hospice. Actually, I'm down at my mother's at the moment, but I'm hoping to be back in time for the last hours or days of one of the people I'm supporting in my local hospice. I'm going to be doing her funeral. But when I met with her to talk about it with her dad and her sister last week, I suggested at that point that we actually had a celebration of her life while she was still with us. You know, because of my own experience in the past, and suggested that it would be lovely for us all to be together in the room, play some of the music, hear the readings, and also that then, you know, gave her permission to start thinking about writing a letter for her dad and her godson. And so I'm hoping that by offering that and doing that, some of the staff will come, you know, would like to come in for a few minutes or whatever, or just know it's happening. So I'm hoping that is gradually going to change, but I think it does take all of us continuing to be enthusiastic, open, pioneers. But I would also say being gentle with them, because we're asking funeral directors and the hospice world to move much more quickly than they're perhaps ready to. But I think we're there. I think we're nearly there.
Yeah, absolutely. And rest homes are another place. Very briefly, I was the manager. I used to was chef at a nursing home, a rest home for a while, and the manager was away, so I sort of stepped in as manager. And a dear elderly gentleman, he'd been an old soldier, he died. And I took it upon myself, because I just hated all these very frail elderly people having the feeling they needed to travel to a crematorium and sit there and think, oh, is it my turn next? So I suggested to the family, bless their hearts, that they did the cremation in the morning, and in the afternoon, the family, it was only 4 of them, immediate family, came and had tea in the rest home with us. And it was wonderful. In the sitting room, I did a lovely little table with a candle, some flowers, his war medals, and we found some military music, and the residents all arrived. We raised a glass of sherry, that was his favourite tipple, and the residents shared their memories of him with the family as a friend, and the family shared their memories with the residents as a cheeky little brother, and all the naughty things he got up to. It was absolutely beautiful. And then I read, I don't know if you know, The Penguin of Death. Do you know that, anybody? You do, Lizzie. It is so, I love it. I absolutely love it. And at the very end, I read The Penguin of Death, and it ends up with, so let's all have a cup of tea. And then we had tea and cake, and that was it. And it was just such a lovely, lovely day, and nobody had to travel anywhere, or it just, and I would love that to happen. So I've been trying to, but I'm never going to live long enough. We're all going to have to rally around.
Thank you so much, Jean. Genuinely, it's been absolutely wonderful. So on behalf of all of Osmic, thank you dearly. Such a friend to us.
Thank you so much. And if anybody needs any, please feel free to contact me, and I'll get back with any information or anything I can help with. I'm so happy to, because I feel passionate about making funerals palatable, as opposed to things we don't want to know about and talk.
Absolutely. For the people here in the chat, I have just put Jean's email, just pop the link there. I've also popped a link to our donation page. So for the people who haven't been with us before, Osmic are run by volunteers. Generally, we don't have any income as such, but we do have outgoings to pay for things like Zoom, to pay for our website, things like that. So we just very, very gently ask for, if you do have the ability, there is absolutely no pressure. I've popped a link into our donation page, which is at the moment a bank transfer, because we're having problems with PayPal. But again, absolutely no pressure whatsoever. If you can't, don't worry about it. Once again, thank you to Jean. Thank you to each of you here for Monday afternoon. It's not a normal time that we do, so it's wonderful to see so many people. And thank you to anyone who's joined us on YouTube. You're more than welcome. We've kept you with us. You're part of our beautiful, beautiful team. Team's the wrong word. You know what I mean. And I am about to stop the recording. Thank you.